It started with a bark, sharp, urgent, and impossible to ignore. Officer Daniel Harper had heard Ranger bark 1,000 times before, at trespassers, during drug raids, even once at a stubborn raccoon refusing to leave a dumpster. But this bark was different. It wasn't just noise. It was insistence. It was alarm. It was the kind of sound that made the hair on the back of your neck rise before your brain even caught up. Ranger, the German shepherd at Harper's side, was locked in place, his body stiff, ears pinned forward, tail straight as a rod. His deep brown eyes weren't darting around like usual when he caught a scent. No, they were locked onto one spot, the base of the stone statue standing tall at the center of Franklin High School's courtyard. The statue was nothing special, really. A weathered likeness of the school's founder, a man whose name most students only remembered because it was engraved in metal beneath his feet. The kids walked past it every day without giving it a second thought. Teachers used it as a landmark. Meet me by the statue after class. Parents took photos in front of it on graduation day. It was part of the scenery, a forgotten piece of granite in a town that hadn't changed much in decades. But Ranger wouldn't move. He growled low, the sound rumbling like a warning. Harper tightened the leash and frowned. "What is it, boy?" The courtyard was quiet, late afternoon sun spilling across the cracked pavement. A basketball rolled somewhere in the distance, shouts from kids at practice echoing faintly. Nothing unusual, nothing threatening, just another small-town school day. But Ranger didn't care about the noise. He pawed the ground near the statue, claws scraping against stone and soil. He dug with frantic energy, like something buried there mattered more than anything else in the world. Harper sighed, looking around. Nobody seemed to be paying attention, which was good. The last thing he needed was a crowd of curious teenagers gathering around while his K9 tore up school property. Still, he trusted the dog. Ranger had been with him for 5 years. Through enough close calls to know the dog's instincts were rarely wrong. He crouched down, brushing his hand along the statue's base where the dirt looked uneven, freshly disturbed. "Strange. Easy, buddy," Harper murmured. He pressed a finger into the soil. It gave way too easily, not compacted like it should have been after all these years. Someone had moved this dirt recently. His stomach tightened. The call that brought him here was routine. A janitor had reported vandalism, graffiti sprayed along the gym wall, and a few broken windows in the science wing. Harper had handled it quickly, paperwork more than police work. The kids responsible were already identified. Nothing that should have led him to the courtyard. Nothing that should have led Ranger here. Yet here they were. Harper pulled out his phone and snapped a photo of the loosened dirt. He'd have to explain this to the department, justify why he thought it was worth investigating. Not easy when budget cuts had half the town convinced police resources were better spent elsewhere. But then Ranger barked again, louder, angrier, and his paw dragged something pale and frayed out of the soil. Harper's heart jumped. He leaned closer. It was fabric, old, tattered, but still holding color. He tugged it gently from the ground, brushing away dirt. A patch clung to the cloth, its emblem faded but clear enough. Franklin High School crest. Harper froze. This wasn't just random trash. This was part of a uniform jacket, Letterman style, the kind students wore with pride, and it looked like it had been underground for decades. He stood quickly, the weight of the discovery hitting him hard. Ranger circled the statue, barking once more before dropping into a sit, staring at Harper as if waiting for acknowledgement. Harper exhaled slowly, running a hand across his jaw. "Good boy." That night, Harper sat at his kitchen table, the jacket scraps sealed in an evidence bag resting in front of him. The house was quiet, except for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the rhythmic tapping of Ranger's claws on the hardwood floor. He couldn't shake the unease. He'd grown up in Franklin. He knew the school well, knew its history. And he remembered, vaguely, the hushed conversations adults used to have when he was a kid. The whispers about a boy who went missing back in the early 90s. A senior, vanished without a trace right before prom. Ethan Cole, that was the name. Harper leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. Could it be? After 30 years? The official story had always been that Ethan ran away. Maybe he'd been mixed up with the wrong crowd. Maybe he couldn't handle the pressure of senior year. People had theories, but no one had proof. The case went cold so fast most folks just stopped talking about it. Franklin was the kind of town that didn't like unsolved mysteries lingering around. But Ranger had found something today. Something that didn't fit the tidy version of history Franklin preferred. Harper rubbed his temple. He'd have to take this to his captain, but he already knew the look he'd get. The weary sigh, the reminder of how much time had passed. 30 years was a long time to reopen old wounds. Still, Harper trusted his gut, and his gut told him Ranger wasn't wrong. The next morning, Harper returned to the school. Ranger pulled hard on the leash the moment they entered the courtyard, straining toward the statue again. Harper let him lead. Students milled about, backpacks slung over shoulders, laughter echoing as they headed for class. None of them paid much attention to the cop and his dog. Ranger barked once at the base of the statue, then began scratching furiously. Dirt flew, small rocks scattering across the concrete. Harper crouched down and brushed aside the soil again, this time uncovering something metallic. He pulled gently. A small chain slipped free, the kind used for necklaces. At the end of it hung a dented locket, mud-caked but intact. Harper's chest tightened. He opened it with care, the hinge squeaking faintly. Inside was a tiny black and white photo. Two teenagers smiling, arms slung around each other. The boy had sharp features, hair slightly too long, grinning like he had his whole future ahead of him. Harper whispered the name, Ethan Cole. It had to be. The girl beside him looked familiar, too, though Harper couldn't place her. Maybe another student from that year. Maybe she was still in town. He slipped the locket into an evidence bag, sealing it tight. Ranger barked once more, as if satisfied with the find, then sat calmly at Harper's feet. This was no longer coincidence. This was a message from 30 years ago, clawing its way back into the present. As Harper drove back to the station, Ranger stretched out in the back seat, panting softly. Harper gripped the wheel tighter than usual, the weight of the discovery pressing on him. He couldn't ignore it. This wasn't just some old relic. This was evidence. Halfway down Main Street, Harper glanced in the rearview mirror at his partner. "You're not letting me drop this, are you?" Ranger tilted his head, ears perked, as if answering without words. Harper chuckled dryly, though there was no humor in it. "Yeah, I didn't think so." He knew what this meant. Late nights, endless questions, reopening a wound the town had long since buried. It would put him at odds with his captain, maybe even with the community itself. But it didn't matter. Ranger had pointed him here for a reason. Sometimes justice didn't stay buried. If you've ever been pulled into a mystery like this, where the past refuses to stay silent, you know how it grabs you and doesn't let go. And if you want to keep following stories like this one, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what comes next. Back at the station, Harper spread the evidence bags on his desk. The scrap of jacket, the locket, both items reeked of time, of secrets long hidden. He opened the old case file on Ethan Cole. Missing person report dated May 17th, 1994. Last seen leaving basketball practice. No confirmed sightings after that. Harper skimmed the notes. Investigators at the time believed Ethan might have been planning to leave town. His parents said otherwise. His mother swore he'd never abandon his younger sister. Teachers described him as bright, social, with a college scholarship waiting. Nothing the file suggested he had a reason to disappear. And yet, the case went cold within months. Harper clenched his jaw. He'd seen this too many times. Small towns brushing away uncomfortable truths because they'd rather believe a story that fit neatly into silence. But Ranger wasn't letting the silence win. Harper reached down, scratching the dog behind the ears. "We're going to find out what happened, partner, no matter what it takes." Ranger leaned into the touch, tail thumping once against the floor. The statue still stood tall in the school courtyard, a silent sentinel hiding its secret. But now, for the first time in 30 years, the ground beneath it had been disturbed. And what Ranger had uncovered was only the beginning. The past was clawing its way back. And Harper knew this was going to change everything. The next morning dawned gray, the kind of sky that felt heavy, like it was carrying secrets of its own. Officer Daniel Harper didn't sleep much. He'd tossed and turned, mind replaying the image of the locket in his hands, the faded smile of a boy who never made it to graduation. Ranger lay at the foot of the bed, occasionally lifting his head when Harper shifted. The dog seemed restless, too, as though he knew they'd stumbled onto something bigger than either of them had bargained for. By the time Harper pulled into the station parking lot, his coffee was already lukewarm, his nerves sharp. He carried the evidence bags under one arm, the jacket scrap and the locket, aware of the weight they represented. Inside, the fluorescent lights hummed overhead. His captain, Mark Peterson, was already in his office. Peterson was a graying man in his late 50s, the kind who carried the weary look of someone who had seen too much but wasn't allowed to forget any of it. Harper knocked lightly and stepped in. "What's got you in here early?" Peterson asked, setting aside a stack of reports. Harper laid the evidence bags on the desk. Ranger found these at the base of the statue at Franklin High. Dirt was loose, like it had been disturbed. Fabric matches a class jacket from '94. The locket had a photo, Ethan Cole. Peterson froze, his lips pressing into a thin line. He leaned back slowly, eyes narrowing. "You're saying the Cole case? After all this time?" "That's exactly what I'm saying." Harper's voice was steady, though his heart thumped hard in his chest. "We never had closure. His family never did either. Now we got something real." Peterson rubbed his temple. "Dan, it's been 30 years. You weren't even on the force then. The case was looked at. The conclusion was he left town. Or someone wanted us to believe that." Harper countered. "Ranger doesn't hit on nothing." He kept digging. He knew. The captain sighed heavily, glancing at the bags again. "All right, I'll authorize a limited dig at the statue site. But you need to tread carefully. People in this town, they don't like their ghosts disturbed. Especially not the ones tied to Franklin High." Harper nodded. That was all he needed. By noon, a small crew assembled at the school courtyard. Students were shuffled to the far side of campus, curious eyes peeking over as word spread that the police were digging up the statue's base. The principal, a stern woman in her 40s named Dr. Melissa Crawford, hovered nervously nearby. "Is this really necessary?" she asked Harper, arms folded. "We've got parents calling already. They want to know why the police are tearing up school property in broad daylight." Harper kept his tone measured. "We have reason to believe evidence related to a missing person case may be buried here. It's important." Ranger circled the statue again, nose low, ears perked. He pawed once at the ground, then sat firmly, eyes fixed. His message was clear: dig here. The crew went to work. Shovels bit into the soil, breaking past layers that hadn't been touched in years. The air grew heavier with every scoop. Students whispered across the courtyard, rumors sparking like wildfire. Harper crouched near the dig site, watching closely. Dirt gave way to something hard, a dull clink of metal against stone. The workers brushed carefully until the outline of a small object appeared, rusted but still intact. It was a locket chain, thicker than the first, tangled and broken. Beside it, they uncovered a button, yellow with age, still faintly showing the school mascot. Peterson, standing nearby, muttered, "Well, I'll be damned." Harper bagged the items, his chest tightening. Every piece made the story more real, more undeniable. Then came the smell. It was faint at first, buried under decades of earth, but distinct enough to make Harper's stomach clench. Ranger growled low, hackles raised. The diggers exchanged uneasy glances. "Stop." Harper's voice was firm. He stepped closer, heart pounding. "We're calling in forensics." The site was secured, cordoned off with bright yellow tape. By evening, a forensics team from the county arrived, setting up portable lights that cast harsh beams across the courtyard. The once ordinary statue now looked sinister under glare, its shadow stretching long and sharp against the pavement. Harper stayed close with Ranger, watching as the specialist dug with precision tools. Every brush of soil away from the base of the statue revealed more: scraps of deteriorated fabric, fragments of what might have been shoes. And then the bone, Small at first, a fragment, pale and unmistakable. The crew froze. One of the techs looked up at Harper, her face grave. "We're looking at human remains," she said quietly. The courtyard seemed to go silent all at once. Even Ranger sat still, ears pinned back, as though he, too, understood the weight of the moment. Harper swallowed hard. His mind flashed to the yearbook photo he'd seen the night before. Ethan Cole's grin frozen in time. 30 years gone, and now, here he was, reduced to fragments beneath a school monument. Peterson placed a hand on Harper's shoulder. "You've opened something big, Dan." Harper nodded, though the air felt heavy in his lungs. This was no longer just about a missing person. This was about justice delayed, maybe even denied. News spread faster than Harper anticipated. By the next morning, every local station ran the story. Remains found at Franklin High linked to 1994 case. Cameras lined the sidewalks. Reporters thrust microphones at anyone connected to the school. Harper sat at his desk, phone buzzing nonstop. Old classmates of Ethan Cole were calling in with memories, tips, and half-forgotten rumors. One voicemail stood out. A man's voice, shaky and low. "I knew Ethan, we all did. He didn't run away. Everyone said he got into it with Coach Bryant that week. You should talk to him, if he's still around." Harper leaned back, brows furrowed. Coach Bryant, he remembered the name. A legend in Franklin sports, tough as nails, still living in town. He'd retired years ago, but was known for walking the track at the school every morning. Harper jotted it down. Another piece of the puzzle. That afternoon, Harper returned to the school grounds with Ranger. The place felt different now, less like a campus, more like a crime scene. Students walked by in hushed tones. Parents hovered nervously. The statue stood roped off, a macabre centerpiece of attention. Ranger tugged hard on the leash, pulling Harper toward the old gym building. The dog barked once at the double doors, nose pressed low against the frame. Harper frowned. "You smell something?" Inside, the gym was dim, the faint scent of sweat and varnish lingering in the air. Ranger led him straight to the locker rooms, nails clicking against tile. He stopped at a section of the wall, sniffing intently, then scratched once, claws raking the paint. Harper crouched, running a hand over the wall. The paint looked newer here, fresh in the rest. He tapped lightly, hearing a dull echo beneath. Hidden space. His pulse quickened. He stepped back, pulling out his phone to call for backup. "This isn't over," he muttered. Ranger growled softly, tail stiff, eyes locked on the wall. The dog had led them here. Again, that night, Harper sat at his kitchen table, files spread across the wood. Ranger rested nearby, head on his paws, eyes half closed but alert. The evidence stacked higher, jacket scrap, locket bones, and now the mysterious wall in the gym. Every clue felt like Ethan Cole's voice breaking through decades of silence, insisting on being heard. Harper leaned back, rubbing tired eyes. "We're in it now, buddy," he whispered. "And something tells me the deeper we dig, the more this town's going to fight us." Ranger's ears twitched, tail thumping once against the floor. Harper allowed himself a thin smile. At least he wasn't alone. The statue at Franklin High no longer stood as a symbol of tradition. Now it was a marker of betrayal, of secrets buried under stone and soil. And thanks to a dog who refused to look away, the truth was clawing its way out. Coach Bryant House sat at the edge of Franklin, a single-story ranch with a sagging porch and a yard littered with rusted lawn equipment. The kind of place that looked like it hadn't been cared for in years, though neighbors still waved politely when he passed by in town. Old reputations had a way of sticking, and in Franklin, people remembered him as the man who led the high school basketball team to 3 state championships. Officer Daniel Harper parked across the street. Rangers shifting in the back seat, ears perked. The dog's gaze never left the house. Harper took a breath, stepped out, and walked up the cracked driveway. Bryant answered the door slowly. He was in his 70s now, stocky frame gone soft, but his eyes were still sharp. He wore a faded Franklin High sweatshirt, sleeves pushed up to his elbows. "Officer Harper," Bryant said flatly, "what brings you here?" "We're reopening the Ethan Cole case," Harper replied. I need to ask you a few questions. Bryant's jaw tightened. After all these years? Haven't you people wasted enough time on that nonsense? Harper studied him. The old coach's voice carried irritation, but there was a flicker, something defensive, that told Harper he was on the right track. Mind if I come in? Harper asked. Bryant hesitated, then stepped aside. Inside, the house smelled faintly of dust and old tobacco. Trophies lined a shelf, photographs of smiling teams frozen in their glory days. Harper noticed one photo in particular. The 1994 team. Ethan Cole in the back row, grinning. Ranger moved ahead, nose twitching as he sniffed the air. He circled the living room once before sitting near the photograph, eyes fixed. Harper took note. You knew Ethan, Harper said. What was he like as a player? Bryant exhaled heavily, settling into an armchair. Talented, smart, had real potential, but he had an attitude. Always thought he was smarter than everyone else. Kids like that, they don't last long. Harper raised a brow. Last I checked, kids like that don't just disappear. Bryant's eyes narrowed. You're barking up the wrong tree. I told the cops back then, Ethan got mixed up with the wrong crowd. Probably hopped a bus to Chicago or Detroit. Who knows? Ranger let out a low growl, breaking the silence. Harper glanced down. The dog's hackles were raised, his body tense. Harper leaned forward, voice calm but firm. Funny thing is, Coach, we found evidence under the school statue. A locket, some fabric, and bones. Ethan's bones. Bryant's face drained of color. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, words failing. His hand trembled against the armrest. Harper stood. If you remember something, now's the time. Otherwise, I'll be back with a warrant. He clipped Ranger's leash, heading for the door. As they left, Harper caught the coach muttering under his breath, voice hoarse. He never should have been there that night. Harper froze, turning slightly. What night? But Bryant didn't answer. His eyes stayed locked on the trophy shelf, jaw tight. Back at the station, Harper replayed the conversation in his head. The coach's slip, the way he'd gone pale at the mention of Ethan's remains. It was more than guilt. It was knowledge. Harper pulled Ethan Cole's file again, flipping through the reports. Last seen leaving practice. A handful of students had testified they saw him near the gym around sunset. After that, nothing. But if Bryant knew Ethan shouldn't have been there, then maybe Ethan saw something he wasn't supposed to. Ranger barked once from his spot near the desk, as if agreeing. Yeah, boy, Harper said softly. We're missing something. That evening, Harper drove back to Franklin High. The school was quiet now, the courtyard taped off, reporters finally gone. Ranger tugged him toward the old gym again. Harper pushed open the creaky doors, flashlight beam cutting across the darkness. The smell of old wood and sweat hung heavy. Ranger moved quickly, pulling Harper straight to the locker room wall where he'd scratched before. Harper knelt, running his hand across the smooth paint. Let's see what you're after, he murmured. With a crowbar borrowed from maintenance, Harper pried at the corner of the wall. Paint cracked, plastic gave way, and a hollow space revealed itself. Dust poured out in a choking cloud. Ranger barked once, pawing at the opening. Harper aimed his flashlight inside. The beam caught on a pile of objects shoved deep into the cavity. He reached in carefully, pulling out one item at a time. A cracked leather backpack, torn at the strap. A pair of sneakers, the soles worn but intact. And then papers crumpled and yellowed with age. Notes. Harper unfolded one, his chest tightening as he read the scrawl handwriting. If anyone finds this, they're lying. They're all lying. Meet me at the courtyard after practice. I'll prove it. It was signed with Ethan's initials. Harper stared at the note, heart racing. This wasn't a runaway. Ethan had discovered something, and it had cost him his life. Ranger whined softly, tail low. Harper rubbed the dog's head. You were right, partner. You were right all along. The next day, Harper brought the evidence to Peterson. The captain read the note twice, lips pressed tight. This is damning, Peterson admitted, but it doesn't tell us who he was meeting. or what he found. We talked to the classmates, Harper said. Someone knows. Someone saw more than they said back then. Peterson gave a reluctant nod. Start with a girlfriend. She still lives in town. Married, kids. Goes by her married name now, Laura Mitchell. Harper jotted it down. Another lead. Laura's house was a neat two-story on the outskirts of town. White siding. Kids' bikes in the driveway. She answered the door cautiously, eyes widening when she saw the badge. Mrs. Mitchell? Harper asked. I need to talk to you about Ethan Cole. Her face went pale. After all these years? We found his remains, Harper said gently. And a note. He mentioned meeting someone in the courtyard. We think he trusted you enough to tell you things he didn't tell others. Laura's hand flew to her mouth, tears springing instantly. Oh, God, I knew it. I knew he didn't run away. She led him inside, wiping her eyes. Ranger sat quietly near the door, watching. Ethan was scared the week before he disappeared, she said, voice trembling. He told me he'd found something in the gym offices. Papers. He wouldn't say what, just that it was wrong, and people would hate him if he told. I begged him not to go to the courtyard that night, but he said he had proof. Harper leaned forward. Proof of what? Laura shook her head. I don't know. He just said it had to do with the school board. Money, maybe. Something that would ruin people's reputations. Harper felt a chill. Generational secrets. The very thing Franklin never wanted unearthed. Do you remember anyone hanging around that night? He asked. Laura hesitated. I saw Coach Bryant. He was pacing near the gym, looking angry. I always thought maybe it was just coincidence. But now, she broke off, covering her face. Harper's mind raced. The coach, the board, Ethan's note. It was all converging. Ranger gave a sharp bark, startling Laura. Harper calmed him with a hand on his collar, but his gut told him the dog was right. The circle was closing. That night, Harper stood outside the statue again, floodlights casting long shadows. The town buzzed with rumors, parents whispering, alumni calling old friends. Ethan Cole's ghost had returned, demanding answers. Harper crouched beside Ranger, staring at the disturbed earth. This isn't just about one boy, is it? He whispered. This is about everyone who wanted the truth buried. Ranger pressed against his side, warm and steady. Harper knew the fight ahead wouldn't be easy. The deeper they dug, the more resistance they'd face. But Ethan's story wasn't staying silent anymore, and neither was Ranger. The town of Franklin was buzzing like a hornet's nest. By the time Officer Daniel Harper parked in front of the precinct that morning, reporters were already waiting on the steps, cameras flashing, microphones thrust forward. The news of Ethan Cole's remains had spread statewide. Parents were demanding answers, alumni were outraged, and the school board was scrambling to issue statements about cooperating fully with law enforcement. Harper kept his head down as he led Ranger past the chaos. The German shepherd moved with purpose, tail low, eyes sharp. If Harper had learned anything by now, it was that his partner had a nose not just for sense, but for lies. Inside the precinct, Captain Peterson was fielding calls left and right. His desk phone rang off the hook while his cell buzzed constantly on the corner of the desk. He looked up when Harper entered, rubbing his temples. This town's about to eat itself alive, Peterson muttered. We need answers, Dan. Fast. Harper dropped a manila folder onto the desk. I think we're getting closer. Laura Mitchell confirmed Ethan had found something, documents tied to the school board. And Coach Bryant's reaction tells me he knows more than he's letting on. Peterson sighed. You want to rattle the coach again? Not yet, Harper said. I want to go where Ranger leads. Yesterday, he hit on that locker room wall. Behind it, we found Ethan's note and belongings. If Ethan was digging into school board corruption, there's a trail somewhere in that building. Peterson gave a weary nod. Then follow it. But, Dan, he leaned forward, voice low. Be careful. Half the people on that board 30 years ago are still movers and shakers in this town. They won't like you stirring this pot. Harper smirked faintly. Good thing I've got a partner who doesn't care about politics. Ranger wagged his tail once. As if on cue, the school was quieter than usual when Harper arrived that afternoon. The courtyard remained cordoned off, yellow tape fluttering in the breeze. Students whispered as Harper passed, some staring wide-eyed at Ranger. Rumors were already swirling. Ghost stories, conspiracy theories, everything kids latch onto when the normalcy of their world shatters. Inside the gym, Harper clipped Ranger's leash loose. "All right, partner, show me what I'm missing." Ranger sniffed along the walls, weaving between old lockers and benches. He paused near the coach's office door, ears forward, body tense. Then he barked once, pawing at the frame. Harper frowned. The office looked ordinary. Papers stacked neatly on the desk, a whistle still hanging from a hook on the wall. But when he knelt down, he noticed something odd, scuff marks along the baseboard, as if the cabinet had been moved repeatedly. He pulled the cabinet aside with a grunt. Behind it was a vent, large enough for a manila envelope to be shoved through. Harper pried it open, shining his flashlight inside. Sure enough, a bundle of papers lay coated in dust. Carefully, he pulled them out. The documents were brittle but legible. They appeared to be financial records, donations, land transfers, construction contracts. Harper skimmed one page and froze. The documents showed that in 1994, Franklin High received a massive donation from a development company. On paper, it was earmarked for stadium improvements. But the signatures at the bottom told another story. The same names from the school board then, and a few familiar names still sitting on the board now. And one stood out in bold ink. Richard Cole, Ethan's father. Harper's pulse quickened. Ethan's own family had been tied to the money. Ranger barked sharply, pulling Harper back. The dog's nose pressed to the desk leg, sniffing furiously. Harper crouched and fell underneath. His fingers grazed something taped in place. He peeled it free, a small cassette tape. Its label faded almost to nothing. "What the hell did you find, kid?" Harper whispered, slipping it into an evidence bag. Back at the station, Peterson called in a favor with the county lab. Within hours, a tech had the cassette digitized. Harper and Peterson sat shoulder to shoulder in a cramped office as the audio file began to play. At first, just static, then voices. Ethan's voice, young, confident, nervous. "If anyone finds this, I need you to know they're stealing from the school. It's all here. My dad's name, the board. I don't know who I can trust anymore." But Coach Bryant said. The recording cut off suddenly, swallowed by static. Peterson cursed under his breath. Damn things damaged. But Harper barely heard him. His mind was stuck on Ethan's words. Coach Bryant said the boy had confided in him, which meant Bryant wasn't just a bystander. He'd been directly involved. Ranger growled low, as if confirming Harper's thoughts. That evening, Harper drove back to Bryant's house. This time, he didn't bother knocking politely. He rapped hard on the door until the old coach opened it. Irritation etched across his face. "You again?" Bryant grumbled. Harper held up the evidence bag with the cassette inside. "You want to explain why Ethan Cole mentioned you on this tape?" Bryant's eyes flicked to the bag, and for a moment his tough exterior cracked. He stepped back, shoulders slumping. "You don't understand," he muttered. "I tried to protect him." "Protect him from what?" Harper demanded. Bryant sank into his chair, rubbing a hand over his face. He found out the board was laundering money. Big donors, shady deals. He brought it to me, scared out of his mind. I told him to leave it alone. He wouldn't listen. Said he was meeting someone at the statue that night. He thought he had proof. Harper's throat tightened, and then he vanished. Bryant nodded slowly, eyes glassy. I went to the courtyard that night. I saw him talking to someone, but it wasn't a student. It was one of the board members, a man with power. I turned away. I told myself it wasn't my business. And the next morning, Ethan was gone. Ranger barked once, sharp and accusing. Harper clenched his fists. You sat on this for 30 years. Bryant's voice cracked. Do you know what happens in a town like this when you go up against the people who control the money? I had a family. I was a coward. I admit it. Harper's disgust boiled in his chest, but he forced himself to stay calm. Who was it, Coach? Who did you see with Ethan? Brian hesitated, then whispered, Samuel Grayson. He was head of the board then. His son, Matthew, runs half the county now. If you go after them, you'll be buried like Ethan was. Harper left the house with his jaw tight, Ranger pacing anxiously at his side. The night air felt colder, heavier. The Grayson family was one of the most powerful in the county. They owned land, businesses, half the buildings on Main Street. And if they had blood on their hands, Franklin was about to implode. Back at the car, Harper crouched beside Ranger. We're in deep now, buddy, he murmured, scratching behind the dog's ears. But we're not backing down. Ranger's tail wagged once, his eyes locked steady on Harper's. By the next morning, Harper had the board record spread across his desk. The names, the signatures, the money trail, it all pointed to one truth. Ethan Cole had discovered corruption so deep it reached the roots of Franklin itself. And for that, he'd been silenced. Peterson stood in the doorway, arms crossed. You realize if you push this, you're going up against people who could crush your career. Harper looked down at Ranger, who sat alert at his feet. Then he looked back at his captain. Some things are worth being crushed for. Peterson studied him for a moment, then gave a faint nod. Then you better brace yourself. Because if the Graysons had a hand in this, they won't go quietly. Harper exhaled, feeling the weight of it all pressing down. The statue in the courtyard had been the perfect hiding place. Public, untouchable, hiding in plain sight. But thanks to Ranger, the silence was cracking wide open. And Harper knew the most dangerous part of the case was just beginning. The old gym smelled of dust and mildew, a relic from another era. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting jittery shadows across the tile floor. Officer Daniel Harper stood in the doorway, heart pounding, while Ranger pulled at the leash, nose pressed low to the ground. The German shepherd was restless, sniffing hard, growling under his breath like something invisible was taunting him. Easy, boy, Harper murmured, though his own nerves were anything but steady. For days, the evidence had piled up. Ethan Cole's belongings, the cassette tape, the documents implicating the school board, Coach Bryant's guilty admission. But something was still missing, something that tied Ethan's final moments to this building. Ranger jerked suddenly toward the locker room. Harper followed, boots echoing loudly. The dog led him to the far corner, near a row of dented metal lockers. His claws scraped against the floor as he pawed insistently. Harper crouched down, shining his flashlight. The tiles here looked slightly off, darker, as a stain long ago and painted over. He pulled out his pocket knife, scraping gently at the surface. The paint chipped away, revealing something underneath, a reddish-brown smear. Blood. His stomach dropped. "Good God!" he whispered. Ranger barked once, sharp and loud, the sound bouncing off the tiled walls. Harper stood quickly, pulling out his phone. "Captain, it's Harper. You need to get forensics down here. Now, we got blood in the old locker room, beneath paint." By the time the forensics team arrived, Harper had secured the area, keeping curious janitors and nosy students out. The techs moved with quiet efficiency, kneeling by the floor where Harper had scraped. One of them glanced up, grim. "You were right. It's blood. Old, but preserved under layers of paint. We'll run it for DNA." Harper nodded, jaw tight. He didn't need the results to know whose blood it was. Ethan had been here. This was where it started, or ended. Ranger paced beside him, whining softly, tail stiff. Harper rubbed the dog's head. "You did good, partner. Real good." The lab worked fast. By the following morning, Peterson called Harper into his office. He had the DNA results in hand, his face grim. "It's a match," Peterson said. "Blood belongs to Ethan Cole." Harper felt his chest tighten. The confirmation was both vindication and heartbreak. For 30 years, the truth had been buried under layers of lies and paint. Peterson leaned forward. "This changes things. A missing persons case just became a homicide investigation, and you can bet the Graysons are already lawyering up." Harper nodded slowly. "Then we push harder. Ethan deserves that much." That afternoon, Harper met with Laura Mitchell again. She sat at her kitchen table, Clutching a mug of coffee, hands trembling, Ranger rested at Harper's feet, watching her with quiet eyes. "Laura, the blood we found in the locker room, it's Ethan's," Harper said gently. "He was hurt inside that school." Tears welled in her eyes. "I knew it. I knew he didn't just run away. He told me someone threatened him, but he wouldn't say who. He was trying to protect me." "Do you remember anything unusual that night?" Harper pressed. Laura shook her head slowly, then hesitated. "Wait. The night he disappeared. I heard shouting when I left the gym. 2 voices, Ethan and an older man. I thought it was Coach Bryan at the time, but now I'm not sure." Harper leaned forward. "Could it have been Samuel Grayson?" Laura's face paled. "It could have. He was always hanging around the school, acting like he owned the place. Everyone knew his money kept the lights on." Harper exchanged a glance with Ranger, who tilted his head, ears perked. The pieces were falling into place. That evening, Harper drove past the Grayson estate. It wasn't just a house. It was a fortress. A sprawling colonial with white columns, manicured lawns, and an iron gate that screamed power. Ranger sat in the passenger seat, ears forward, growling low. "You don't like it either, huh?" Harper muttered. He didn't dare approach without a warrant, but just seeing the place drove home what he was up against. The Graysons weren't just wealthy. They were untouchable. Or at least, they thought they were. Harper's phone buzzed. A text from Peterson. "Watch your back. Word is, they know you're digging." Harper sighed, gripping the wheel tighter. "Guess we're in it now, buddy." The next morning, Harper returned to the school with a court order in hand. This time, he had the authority to tear the place apart if necessary. Ranger led the way, nose pressed to the floor, weaving between the old lockers. Suddenly, the dog barked, stopping at a locker near the end of the row. Harper yanked it open. Inside was nothing but dust and cobwebs, or so it seemed. Then he noticed a false back panel. He pried it loose. Behind it, tucked away, was another bundle of papers, brittle with age. He flipped through them quickly. They were notes, schedules, and lists of names, students, teachers, and board members. At the top, scrawled in Ethan's handwriting, "Meeting at statue, proof of payout." Harper's chest tightened. Ethan had documented everything. Ranger barked again, this time at the locker room's far wall. Harper moved quickly, flashlight beam catching on faint streaks along the tile, streaks that looked disturbingly like drag marks. His throat went dry. Ethan had been attacked here. His blood spilled, his body dragged out, and then buried under the statue. Harper exhaled shakily, fighting the wave of anger rising in his chest. "They killed him right here," he whispered, and everyone just pretended not to see. Ranger pressed close, as if grounding him. Later that day, Harper sat with Peterson in the captain's office. The new evidence spread across the desk. "This is enough to put heat on the Graysons," Harper said. "Notes, blood, remains. Ethan didn't just vanish, he was silenced." Peterson rubbed his chin. "It's enough to open doors. But going after the Graysons won't be easy. They've got lawyers, politicians, friends in high places. They'll fight tooth and nail to keep this buried." Harper looked down at Ranger, who sat steady at his side. "Then we'll fight harder." That night, Harper walked Ranger through the quiet streets of Franklin. The town looked the same on the surface. Kids riding bikes, porch lights glowing, the smell of barbecue drifting from backyards. But underneath, everything felt different now. People whispered when he passed. Some offered nods of support. Others turned away. The truth was surfacing, and Franklin wasn't ready for it. Harper stopped at the statue, its base still surrounded by tape and floodlights. He crouched beside Ranger, staring at the stone face of the founder. "They built this place on lies," Harper murmured. "And you, buddy, you're tearing it down." Ranger leaned into him, warm and solid. Harper stood, determination hardening his voice. "Tomorrow we confront Grayson. No more shadows." The dog barked once, sharp and certain, echoing to the courtyard like a vow. The Grayson estate loomed like a shadow over Franklin. White columns, wide porches, and acres of perfectly manicured lawn, gave an air of untouchable authority. For decades, the Graysons had been the town's kingmakers, funding campaigns, donating to churches, and writing checks that kept Franklin High's lights on. But now, Officer Daniel Harper stood at the iron gates with Ranger at his side, holding a warrant that cut through their polished image like a blade. The guard at the gate gave him a skeptical look until Harper flashed the papers. "We're here on official business," Harper said. "Open it." The gates groaned as they swung wide. Ranger growled low in his throat, ears forward, his entire body tense. Harper understood the feeling. They were walking into enemy territory. Inside, Samuel Grayson greeted him with forced civility. The patriarch of the family was in his late 60s, sharp-eyed, wearing a tailored suit despite being a home. His son Matthew, tall and broad with the slick confidence of a politician in the making, hovered just behind him. "Officer Harper," Samuel said smoothly. What an unexpected visit. Harper held up the warrant. "We're executing a search." "Step aside." Samuel's jaw tightened, but he moved back. "You'll find nothing here. This witch hunt of yours is a waste of taxpayer money." Ranger barked once, sharp and cutting through the air. Harper gave the leash a gentle tug, but his gut told him to trust the dog. The search began. Detectives and deputies combed the mansion, while Harper and Ranger moved from room to room. The house smelled of polished wood and expensive cologne, but beneath it lingered something else, stale, metallic, almost sour. Ranger pulled Harper toward a study lined with shelves of law books and family portraits. The dog stopped at the heavy oak desk, sniffing furiously. Then he barked, pawing at the bottom drawer. Harper yanked it open. Inside was a folder of old photographs, some faded, others clearer. He froze as he flipped through them. Ethan Cole's face stared back at him from several shots, yearbook photos, candid pictures from games, even one from the courtyard at Franklin High. "Why do you have these?" Harper demanded, holding up the photos. Matthew stepped forward, smirking. "We collect history." Ethan was part of Franklin's story. Harper narrowed his eyes. History doesn't end with someone's blood in a locker room. For the first time, Matthew's smirk faltered. The search turned up more. In a locked cabinet, detectives found financial ledgers, donations routed through shell companies, contracts signed by Samuel Grayson, and other board members from 1994. It was proof of the corruption Ethan had discovered. But before Harper could process it all, Ranger growled, body stiff. The dog was staring at the fireplace, nose twitching. Harper followed his lead, crouching beside the hearth. The bricks at the back looked newer, the mortar fresher than the rest. "Get me tools," Harper ordered. Within minutes, deputies pried loose a brick. Behind it was a hidden cavity. Harper reached in and pulled out a small box, rusted at the hinges. He flipped it open. Inside lay a knife, its blade dull, but speckled with stains that never fully faded. Harper's throat tightened. "We'll need this tested." Samuel's face turned pale. Matthew stepped forward, voice raised. "This is harassment. You have no idea what you're stirring up." Harper stood, holding the evidence bag high. "I know exactly what I'm stirring up. 30 years of lies." Ranger barked again, sharp and relentless. Back at the station, the knife was logged into evidence. Lab results would take time, but Harper already knew. His gut told him this was a weapon that had spilled Ethan's blood. Peterson leaned against the doorway of Harper's office, expression grim. "You're making powerful enemies, Dan. I've already had calls from city council, the mayor's office, hell, even the state rep. They all want you to back off." Harper rubbed his eyes. "We've come too far to stop. Ethan's family deserves justice. This town deserves the truth." Peterson exhaled slowly. "Then watch yourself. The Graysons don't lose gracefully." That night, Harper drove home in silence, Ranger in the back seat. The streets of Franklin looked normal. Porch lights glowing, families eating dinner, teenagers cruising down Main Street. But beneath the calm, Harper felt the storm brewing. When he pulled into his driveway, his headlights caught something odd, an envelope propped neatly against his front door. Harper's pulse quickened. He stepped out cautiously, Ranger bounding ahead, sniffing the air. The envelope was unmarked. Inside was a single sheet of paper with 4 words scrawled in black ink. "Leave it alone, Harper." Ranger growled, teeth bared. Harper crumpled the note in his fist. "Not a chance," he muttered. The next morning, Harper met with Laura Mitchell again. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes. "They won't stop," she whispered. "You don't understand. My husband got a call last night. Someone told him to tell me to keep my mouth shut about Ethan. They know where we live." Harper's chest tightened. "They're trying to scare you. Don't let them." Tears filled her eyes. "I can't put my kids in danger. I've already lost Ethan once. I can't lose anyone else." Harper reached across the table, steady and calm. "You're not alone. I'll protect you. Ranger will protect you." As if understanding, the German shepherd pressed against Laura's leg, offering a quiet kind of comfort words couldn't match. Later that day, Harper and Ranger returned to the school once more. The crime scene tape still fluttered around the statue, a stark reminder of what had been hidden beneath it. Harper crouched beside Ranger, staring at the disturbed earth. "You brought us here for a reason," he murmured. "What else am I not seeing?" Ranger sniffed around the base again, circling once before stopping near a patch of dirt that looked slightly different. He pawed hard, dirt flying. Harper knelt and dug with his hands. His fingers brushed something solid. He pulled it free, a rusted key ring with 2 old keys attached. One was marked storage. His heart skipped. Storage meant records, files, maybe even Ethan's missing proof. The key led them to a forgotten storage room in the school's basement. The door creaked open, revealing stacks of boxes, dust coating everything like a shroud. Ranger sniffed, moving immediately toward the back corner. Harper followed, flashlight beam cutting through the gloom. The dog pawed at a box shoved behind others, tail wagging furiously. Harper dragged it out, coughing as dust filled the air. Inside were more papers, contracts, letters, handwritten notes. At the very top, another sheet in Ethan's handwriting. "They think I don't know, but I do, and I won't stay quiet." Harper's throat tightened. "You left us a trail, kid," he whispered, "and we're following it." Ranger barked once, sharp and certain. That night, Harper spread the documents across his kitchen table. Ranger sat nearby, eyes watchful, as if guarding the evidence. The papers detailed payoffs, land deals, and secret meetings. Names of board members, teachers, even town officials, all tied to Samuel Grayson's empire. Harper leaned back, running a hand over his face. The corruption wasn't just in the school, it was in the town's very foundation. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You've gone too far. Back off, or you'll regret it." Harper stared at the screen, then glanced at Ranger. "Looks like we're getting close," he said softly. Ranger's tail thumped once, steady and sure. The storm had broken. Ethan's voice, silenced for 30 years, was finally being heard through scraps of fabric, drops of blood, and notes scribbled in fear. And with every clue, the walls the Graysons had built were starting to crack. Harper knew the danger was real now. They wouldn't just threaten him. They'd come for him. But as he looked at Ranger, steady and unshakable, he felt the resolve harden in his chest. "They buried him once," Harper whispered. "We won't let them bury the truth." Ranger barked, the sound echoing through the quiet house like a promise. The fight wasn't over. It was only beginning. The town of Franklin had always prided itself on being quiet, safe, and ordinary. But ordinary was gone now. By the time Officer Daniel Harper pulled up to the courthouse with Ranger at his side, the place looked more like a battlefield than a civic building. Reporters crowded the steps, microphones raised, camera flashes popping in the gray morning light. Parents shouted, alumni demanded answers, and the name Ethan Cole was on every tongue. Ranger stayed close, muscles tense beneath his thick coat. Harper adjusted his grip on the leash, steadying himself against the chaos. They were here because of Ethan, because of 30 years of silence finally broken by a dog who wouldn't stop digging. Inside, the district attorney spread the evidence across a long oak table. The financial ledgers, Ethan's notes, the cassette tape, the blood stains from the locker room, and now the knife. Harper stood behind it all, arms crossed. Peterson leaned against the wall nearby, looking as worn as Harper had ever seen him. "This is enough to indict Samuel Grayson," the DA said firmly. "And if we squeeze him, Matthew won't be far behind. You've done more in 2 weeks than this town managed in 3 decades. Harper didn't smile. He couldn't. Ethan Cole was still dead. The truth might finally surface, but it didn't feel like victory yet. Ranger gave a low whine, as if sensing Harper's unease. That evening, Harper drove back to Franklin High. The courtyard was deserted now, the statue still standing but surrounded by floodlights and tape. It no longer looked like a symbol of school pride. It looked like a gravestone. He crouched beside Ranger, staring at the weathered stone face. "This is where it ends, buddy," Harper whispered. "One way or another." Ranger pressed against him, steady and unshakable. The following morning, Harper's phone buzzed with an urgent call. Peterson's voice was tight. "Grayson's on the move. We got word Samuel's cleaning out his office at the estate. If he destroys those files, we lose our smoking gun." Harper was already grabbing his jacket. "I'm on my way." Ranger barked once, sharp and ready. The estate loomed ahead, its white columns stark against the cloudy sky. Deputies had surrounded the property, but Samuel Grayson wasn't surrendering quietly. His SUV roared down the long driveway, tires spitting gravel as he tried to flee. "Stop that car," Harper shouted. Squad lights flashed. Deputies closed in. Samuel swerved, nearly losing control before skidding to a stop at the end of the drive. Officers rushed forward, pulling him out. Even then, Samuel's voice was arrogant, furious. "You think you've won? You don't know what you're dealing with. My family built this town." Harper stepped forward, Ranger growling low at his side. "No, Ethan Cole built this case." And Ranger made sure we listened. Samuel's eyes flicked to the dog, and for the first time, Harper saw fear there. In the days that followed, Franklin changed. Slowly, painfully, but it changed. The courthouse was packed as charges were filed. Conspiracy, obstruction of justice, manslaughter. The Grayson name, once untouchable, now stained every headline. Alumni spoke out. Teachers came forward, and townspeople admitted what they had long suspected but never dared say aloud. At Ethan Cole's childhood home, Laura Mitchell placed flowers on the porch. She hugged Harper, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you," she whispered. "You gave him back his voice." Harper shook his head. Ranger did. The German shepherd sat patiently beside them, ears perked, eyes steady. His work wasn't glory. It wasn't medals. It was simply refusing to stop listening to the silence. But Franklin wasn't all gratitude. There were whispers in corners, angry mutters from those loyal to the Graysons. Harper knew he had made enemies that wouldn't forgive. Threats still trickled in. Notes slid under his door. He ignored them. Ranger didn't. Every creak at night, every strange car on the street, Ranger was there, alert, ready. Harper slept because his partner didn't. 1 week later, the statue came down. The town council voted unanimously. No more granite found her standing over Ethan's grave. A crowd gathered as cranes lifted the stone figure, lowering it onto a flatbed truck. Some cheered, others cried. For Harper, it was closure wrapped in sorrow. Beneath the empty pedestal, a plaque was installed. In memory of Ethan Cole, 1977 to 1994. May the truth never be buried again. Harper stood in the crowd, Ranger at his side. Laura Mitchell and her children clutched each other, tears streaking their faces. The town that had once looked away was now forced to face its reflection. Harper crouched beside Ranger, scratching behind his ears. "We did it, partner. You gave him justice." Ranger's tail thumped once against the pavement. That night, Harper sat at his kitchen table, case files stacked in neat piles. The evidence was sealed, the arrest made, but the weight of it all still pressed on him. He poured himself a cup of coffee and looked down at Ranger, who rested at his feet. "You know," Harper said softly, "I don't think Ethan would have ever been found without you. You barked, you dug, you listened when no one else did." Ranger looked up, eyes steady, tail wagging faintly. Harper smiled, weary but proud. Guess that makes you Franklin's real hero. The dog leaned against his leg, warm and constant. The town would never be the same. Parents would tell their kids about Ethan Cole, not as a ghost story, but as a warning about silence and power. The courtyard would no longer be just a meeting spot, but a memorial. And in the middle of it all, one truth stood clear. It took a dog to remind Franklin that justice doesn't stay buried. And now, as this story closes, I want to thank you for staying with me through every twist, every secret, and every bark that brought us here. But let me ask you, if Ranger hadn't dug at the statue that day, do you think Franklin would have ever faced its truth? Or would the silence have lasted another 30 years?